trying to think of it.
If you're in a vehicle traveling at the speed of light and you turn your headlights on, will they do anything?
Thank you, Lenny, for joining today and talking about library development.
I've heard of that.
Now, what goes into everything with library development? What can you tell us about?
Well, of course, I'm a little biased, but I think that's where all the magic happens. I mean, Microvellum kind of is what it is. The users have no control over it unless you get an update. But whereas the library data, it's like the sky's the limit. It's like, and that's what attracted me. When I first realized it, I saw all those spreadsheets, and a lot of people, maybe shy away from it. But I was like, oh, wow, it just made sense, So I'm like, because I can get in there and, you can just do whatever. And so it's like, you're just limitless.
Yeah.
So that kind of that's always been my passion, forever, is getting those workbooks in conjunction with graphics and, just a bunch of other things, and really streamlining how you can get, just be more efficient. And my previous role before I came to Microvellum, that was, we kind of looked at the library like our secret weapon, because anyone, our competitors could buy Microvellum, the guy down the block could buy Microvellum, but nobody had our library. And that's where we just invested, and made it better and better, and it just never ended. It was just continually getting better and better. Yeah. So that's what's so, I think, what's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, and I can relate to that too, because that was the same before I joined the Microvellum team. It was, like I told you before, we were stuck, I shouldn't say stuck, but we were using the 18.2 library for 10 years because we just put so much development into it. And then, we then took the leap, went up to the 43.4, I think was the first one, and then onto the 49.1 before I left. Now, I don't know if they've continued on and gone to any of the newer libraries, but, and speaking of newer libraries, we've got the Foundation Library that is, I guess it's on the tail end of being in beta,
it's
right?
Technically, this month we did, enough people have been using it that it's to a point where it's very much viable. I mean, there's, we're still finding little things here and there, but because of the structure, whatever we come across, it's like, oh, it's just a little, cross the T, dot an I. No. Yeah, dot the I, cross the T. Let's get that flipped. It's just, so yeah, as of July 2021, we went ahead and, put out the first release. And then every couple of weeks, we'll probably be just putting out more and more releases as we make improvements. We have a ton of hardware that we want to add. And that's what's so cool about it, is it's so easy to patch and add, additional, whether it be hardware or products or subassembly inserts or, I should probably preface, when we talk about libraries here, I don't think because I know it can be a really difficult thing for people to just, it's not like, oh, I'm just going to get a new library, especially when you invested so much of energy and time into it. So we're not saying throw away all that. If you're making money and you're happy, you don't have any problems with your library, don't worry about it. But for those of you who maybe aren't happy with the library that you have, or if you're new, you're just getting started, this, when we say new library, it isn't just like the next version or something. We literally took what was a 20-year-old library. I was thinking about that. My gosh, Microvellum has been building upon its library since like the late 90s. And so this was a clean break. We didn't nuke it. It's still there. It's, we just kind of set it aside because it got to a good point. It's stable, but we just wanted to reinvent it from literally, let's just rethink this. If we were to start from scratch, what would a new library look like? And, taking into account all the lessons that we learned over the last 20 years of, we've tried this and that didn't work, and we tried that, but that really did work, And plus we have multiple data developers all over the world, right? As many of you know, there's a large user base in the Southern Hemisphere, Australia, New Zealand, and other areas that Australasia, like they technically call it. But they had a completely different library, and it had great success. And so they kind of branched off many, many years ago. They branched off and went in this direction. In North America, Canada, US, we kind of went in that direction. And it was really interesting to see just how it evolved. Problem with that was, over here they'd invent something or develop something, and it would help them, but we couldn't. It was not compatible.
Right. Everything is just
vice versa,
structured differently.
Yeah. So they come out, new hardware, flip up hardware, and we had to basically do it twice. So it was double the effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't like that. So we're like, how can we? That's kind of why we just paused those two evolutionary tangents, whatever, and just take the best of both. What would that look like?
Yeah. And, I've heard too the term agile development, and the way I can understand, from a user of that library that took 20 years that was built upon, that, there can be some apprehension to change. And like you were saying, you don't have to if you don't want to, but, I think, with that term agile development, you look at, it took 20 years of building upon it to get to that point. And I think with this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that having that kind of universal, unified library, that agile development will be able to, take reign, and then you're gonna get to that point in a much shorter time. You're gonna be able to build upon it and build upon it in a much quicker fashion.
And that's what we're saying, because we're looking at things really from fresh. When we say 20 years, that isn't necessarily a good thing, because over that 20 years, there's been numerous different developers have contributed to that. And a lot of times what happens is, like, a data developer will look at a formula and be like, well, I don't know what's going on here. I'm just going to add to the end of that formula, which is really a terrible way to develop. But, I'm just being honest here. But that's a lot of times what has happened. And so we end up with these unnecessary complexity things, or things that we got a little too fancy with it. It is automation, but you can take even good automation to an unhealthy extreme. And so I think we were kind of over automating in some areas. My personal feeling, I always bring up hinges. I think I had a good look at how we have hinges in the older libraries, and I just wasn't satisfied. I thought it was, over the years, I think it was just too complicated, because it's complicated when you go to document it, or I just want to add a new hinge, and you start writing down the steps. That's when it became really obvious, this is too complicated. It needs to be simple,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's our emphasis on this new foundation library, is got to keep it simple, and it's got to be easy to learn, easy to add. It's got to be agile. It's got to be updatable.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be documented. It's the thing we really need to document it.
Yeah, well, I know right now the team that's working on this, as I've been able to use it, there have been things that I've been able to say, hey, it'd be great if it could do this, and it's 2 days later, that's all done. And then we got another beta build, because that was all during that initial beta phase, where it seemed like almost every week there was a new beta version coming out, because there were just so many improvements coming in, and they were happening so fast.
Yeah, and that's a testament to the structure, because I'd come across things and be like, oh, there's this issue, and I'm thinking that's going to take a week, because we have hundreds of products in there, right? Surely that's going to take days of, maybe we got to refactor something, right? And that's how it was in the old structure, because it was a little convoluted. So it was took all this work. But in this new structure, it's built in a way that it's like, it's hard to just explain verbally, but like you said, like within a couple hours, I was working with a developer and he says, "Oh, I got that done." Like, no, there's no way you did that over the weekend or whatever, over the day. And I look, I'm like, gosh, you did it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's because of, it's just a smarter, cleaner, more efficient, thought out structure. So that's why I'm like super excited about it.
And so what are some of the benefits then to, it being universal instead of, because I mean, there are some things in there that it took me a while to kind of get used to it because, North America has their own kind of terminology and their own kind of standards and, versus pretty much the rest of the world. So, how is it being universal? How does that benefit everybody?
I'm just talking off the cuff here. I have no notes. I didn't even prepare for this. So it's just totally off the top of my head. But that is a really good question. And it's something we definitely tackled in the beginning because we're like, in Australia, it's a bench top, and over here it's a countertop or a lot of things like that. And there's just the whole metric imperial thing, those were big obstacles. I mean, good grief, in Australia, the door swing lines are opposite than what they are everywhere else. So what we did is we created, we did a variety of different things, but one of them is there's a region setting in the library. So you can just specify, it's probably the first thing you're going to want to do if you get it. What region am I in? And so we have a table, and some of the formulas will look to that. So if we have an area like door swing lines, we'll just check. If the region equals Australia, do this. Otherwise, do that. Part names. Are all formula driven. We come up. There was like half dozen different ways over the years that data developers were accommodating metric to imperial conversions. So the developers in Microvellum came up with some custom functions. There's actually 4 new custom functions strictly to facilitate the metric imperial thing. So M to U or I to U is so you can, because a lot of data comes to us in imperial. If the vendor is from imperial, so we have all these imperial numbers. We cannot put an imperial number in here anymore. So we have to wrap it in that function. Same with metric. They come to us in metric. Okay, we'll just wrap it in this little wrapper. So depending on what your units are set to, it just all magically happens. But if you never deal with that, you can get rid of that. But we have to ship it that way. We're only maintaining one database. This other cool thing is previous I had to do everything twice. So I would develop an imperial, do all this work and I can't forget, I got to come over and repeat exactly what I did. And there's room for mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And just way too much maintenance. So the other thing we did is a lot of materials or hardware items, they may only be regionally available too. So so some of the stuff I mentioned is in the database, but in Microvellum, we actually, in the materials, you'll see like a region availability. So you can tag, a hardware, because a lot of the hardware companies do this, is they'll have an international product list, but then in the US, they'll change it up a little bit. So it's different. It's
dang US, we got to
US to Canada, because Canada clients will say, hey, this is wrong. We're like, oh, well, that's because it's wrong to you, but in the US, it's right. So we'll fix it. And the Canadian clients are like, hey, this is wrong, or vice versa. So a lot of kudos also. I don't want to get too much further into this without calling out my counterpart down under, Jamie Broadbent. He's an amazing library data developer. He's been doing this for as long as I have, a long, long time. And so we have a very, very high caliber individual. It's not just like a noob person that's helping orchestrate this. And so him and I work together, even though we're on different time zones. That's why I kind of stay a little late. He gets up a little early, and we work together almost daily on just reviewing things. And because over there, he's he knows how they build it over there,
Mhm.
but he doesn't necessarily know what would work over here. And not that I know, but if I don't know, I'll go try to find out. And, we don't get everything right. That's why it was a long beta process where people were starting to give us feedback, but we've already got companies in Canada that are using it, and New Zealand, Australia, they're using it. And we're just now getting into the US. More and more clients are using it. Yeah, it's good.
All right. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm excited. I'm gonna be honest too. I was nervous when I heard this. Like I said, since 2008, I've been using the same structure. So I mean, I've committed to memory all those defined names, and I'm gonna have to do that again. But I listened to the benefits. I have seen a lot of the benefits. I mean, the speed improvements are crazy. I mean, it's a lot faster. I love the rendering capabilities. They're all controlled through the project wizard. That's super slick when you're trying to create something real quick to submit for design and approval. But I was apprehensive, I'm not gonna lie. But the more I get into it, the more I play with it, the more I learn it. The more I'm like, okay, I can see this is going to gain traction. It might take a while for a lot of the diehards who have used the newer 50s and 40s libraries, but I think once those benefits start rolling out, they're going to see that this really is the foundation, right? And so what does that mean, foundation? Like,
I was just going to say that isn't just a random word. So the idea, the reason we named it the foundation is we have plans. Well, we've already begun. We're going to be developing bolt-on like modules or like a library add-on. So like you may just start out with cabinets. That's what you guess. You got cabinets, okay? Well, you may decide, hey, Microvellum is offering an office furniture library or a closet library or advanced, fixtures, store fixtures library. And so without getting a new database or without having to change active library or any of that awkward stuff, it's just another category. So we just drop it in, uses all the same spec groups, all the same sub-assembly. Maybe we'll drop in some extra sub-assemblies perhaps. So the upgradability is way better. Same with hardware too. Like to add a new drawer, you just literally just drop a new sub-assembly in there, and there's this one spot, you just add a name, and then boom, you've got a new drawer, And so we have, this is maybe a little more long-term, but we would love to work towards having like a store, where people can develop almost like an app store, for your phone. People can develop their own cool products and inserts, and then, people can acquire them or whatever and rank them. But that's probably more further down the road. But we had to start over with a foundation that is more conducive to that kind of plug and play, as a foundation. So that's kind of the reason why we named it that.
All right. Well, I know. So for anybody who's watched any of the wood hacks, all those wood hacks have been based off of the 50.7. So I apologize to everybody who is using the foundation library already. I am learning that now. So there's going to be a while there where still the 50.7, but I'll start, mingling in the
I have to learn
the foundation
some new
stuff.
hacks.
Yeah.
There's a whole new, and I've had to humble myself a little too, because you get so familiar with something and you feel like you're the king of this domain, and you feel, and to have to like almost go backwards, it is hard. Someone asked me a question, hey, can the library do this? And I'm like, well, now I'm like, I gotta go look, oh yeah, there it is. Library Designer is so quick though. So if you're wondering what is in this library, so just as an example, the older 50 library takes like 10 minutes just to build the database just to start using Library Designer. And that's because all those parts and tokens, they're just kind of more haphazardly. They weren't ever optimized for that tool. This new library is optimized for the tool that is Library Designer. So instead of 10 minutes, you could build it in like 10 seconds. Like you have a new Library Designer database. And then from that, you can search, for features or, hey, is this in here? So that's another cool thing is Library Designer works amazing.
Right. So now not only is the agile development, that's been used here, our clients can take that agile development and continue it on
Absolutely
for them too.
Because I admit, it takes, you got to eat your Wheaties. If you're going to use Library Designer, you got to be careful. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, you've played around. If you're not careful, you can quickly destroy or mess up your library. And that's because, you may click on a part and, here's all the other products that are using this part. And it's just like, what? You sort of wrap your head around it. It's like, But in the foundation library, because all the cabinets are really a clone from a master, we can get into that later, we have common parts are all over. So the same cut part is in a base, a tall, an upper, and so just that right there is just so much more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how we went about it. When we first started, we said, sorry, my brain is firing in 10 different directions. So I'm trying to answer your question, but then it reminds me of something else. It's totally off script. I was like, I want to say this. We took a master cabinet or product. And so we made it can be a base, a tall, an upper. It's like this one product can just do all this stuff. And we just beat on it. We added different inserts, got all those working. We added corner clips, things that modify. We just threw everything we can think of what we want in this library in one product. It was so quick. And then we took that one and then we cloned it. So turned it into a 1-door base, a 1-door upper, a 1-door tall, a 2-door base, a 2-door, a drawer bank. It's really all so you have 200 cabinet products that are really derived from one. So if you have something really custom, you can just throw away all those cabinets that it comes with. Just modify that one master and either just run with that.
You could build an entire library.
Yeah, or just clone that into whatever you need,
Yeah.
And then we took a corner cabinet, same thing. We just made a master corner cabinet, beat the tar out of it. Once we got it happy, then we just cloned it.
You made it happy by beating the tar out of it?
Yeah, well, we were all happy with it. It's submissive. We made it submit to our needs. So you'll see that if you do get a hold of this library, you're going to wonder, what is this? There's a whole category of the masters. There's about a dozen different masters. There's a corner one. Ooh, yeah. If you like trig, they're in angle cabinets. My favorite. There's one in there. It's called any angle, where it can elbow inwards or outwards.
Oh shoot!
So you can just specify.
I've messed around with that one.
Oh yeah, it's cool. We just added an angle toe kick too that goes underneath it. It matches. We've never had that ability before in the 50 library. So that's super cool.
Nice. No, it's all exciting. I'm like I said, I've got to dabble in it more. I've dabbled in it enough to at least kind of start to see some of the other things. One of the other things that I've noticed too, there are now hardware wizards, edgeband wizards, material wizards, and even a whole formula-driven material spec group, which there were certain formula-driven materials in the 50 version libraries.
Yeah, we were just kind of toying around with it, and Microvellum, as a development direction, we were a little bit on the fence, is this ready for prime time, honestly. But several clients have taken it and run with it, seem to be really happy with formula materials. And so this library, when you get it, you're going to see 3 spec groups. That's just kind of how it ships because it's one database. Mm-hmm. So if you install as Imperial, probably the first thing you want to do is take that metric spec group and just chuck it, or vice versa. But the third spec group is called Unitless. I think that would be named Unitless. And so that has a little example formula. It's a real simple approach of how you can kind of get started using formula materials. And so, in order to do that, in order to enter, you can see the formulas if you go into the material UI and find the formula material. Yeah, you see it there. But how do you interact with those formulas?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what these wizards are for. You'll have a edge banding wizard and a cut parts wizard. And that's kind of where you can interact with, and it's totally user definable. You can set it up. But there's a real simple way to get started right there.
No, and I love that too. It comes shipped with examples that, if you want to tweak it, customize it to fit your needs, you don't have to try and start from scratch and figure out, what direction are we going to go with a formula-driven material? There's some groundwork already done. So, and that's kind of I don't want to say a taboo subject, but it kind of is. I love formula-driven materials. That's actually what have set mine up to, because it is nice to just be able to get in, and it's almost faster and easier to control at a project level, which, sometimes for companies who are trying to maintain all those different materials, now the material list can be condensed down because you're only going to use a few that
in that workbook. Instead of 20,000 rows of material, you've got just like a dozen of these little smart guys that are just figuring it all out,
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the things we struggle with as a data development. You're making these decisions. We could do, we could get all fancy, but the more fancy you get, the more you alienate all the 90% of people that would never do it that way.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the things you're like, well, why is this so simple? Or why didn't you just take it to the next step? And we have to like restrain ourselves with what we can do with the library as we ship it. Does that kind of make sense? Because
you don't want to put people deep down the rabbit hole to start.
You have to build it this way.
Yeah.
So we make these really grueling decisions. We're like, and so we've erred on, let's just keep it simple, and assuming that if they want to take it in a different direction, you can, the sidewalk can just keep going. But at some point we have to draw the line of where, as far as we're going to take it.
Yeah, or if you don't want it to be a sidewalk, they can make it a freeway. However far they want to go.
Hardware wizard. Also, you'll notice there are no hardware pointers in there, which is kind of weird. If you go in the material file, you look at your pointers, your edge band and cut parts, hardware, there's like, what? And so that we use a wizard instead. So you go to the hardware wizard and you have, combo boxes, check boxes, all the different things where you can interact depending on the hardware. So that's very, very powerful. And we broke it up. We could have put everything in the project wizard, but we decided that we kind of chunked it up. So it's not too many eggs in one basket. There is a project wizard for those types of things like, default cabinet sizes and stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing in there about materials. If you want a wizard for your materials, we actually put it in the M workbook for sheet goods, the E workbook for edge banding, and the H workbook is where we store all of the hardware wizard data. So it's kind of compartmentalized that way.
Yeah.
Again,
it kind of, in a sense, it streamlines it to a point where your project wizard is no longer full of, again, however many hundreds of variables that could be in there. It's condensed down to just the ones that you need to change per project. And then your other wizards, same thing. Just everything it definitely seems more organized. In that fashion.
Maybe when you're editing this, you can put on the screen right here, put a little example of what we're talking about. Yeah, that's cool.
All right, so I've got one last question for you. So what can users who might be on the fence about switching over to this new library, what benefits can they have from doing that?
I'll share what I used to do when I used to be a cut lister or a Microvellum user. And we had our own library. Obviously, it was custom, and it was its own thing. But I kind of had one eye on what was Microvellum up to, And so whenever Microvellum would release a new library, I would just download it, install it. And luckily, the way the configurations work, it doesn't overwrite anything that you have. It'll create a whole separate configuration, and so you can, fire up Microvellum, then you just pick that new configuration, and then you can just check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there eating my sandwich at lunchtime. I got, a half hour, a few minutes to just poke around. And I just kind of poke around and look at it. What's that? Just be curious, just look around. And then I would see something like, ooh, that's an interesting formula, I kind of like. So I would take that idea, and try to incorporate it into mine. You do need to be aware that because this library is so different, you can't take these products and just drop them into your current library. It would
right. All the pointers and defined names.
I mean, all the sub-assemblies are different. All the globals are different. So unfortunately, it's a clean break from anything, in those 30, 40, or 50 version iterations.
Right, and I think that's what brings on that apprehension. So what could you say, to those to kind of ease that apprehension, maybe break that apprehension to where they're like, you know what, all right, maybe I will download it, play with it, and see, what it can do for us.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would, like I said, install it and then just go through the globals. This is when it's nice to have two different versions of Microvellum. If sometimes you have the ability to do this, where you might have the Microvellum production, side by side on dual monitors, and then you got your OEM 2021, whatever. So you kind of running them both, and you just go through the globals, whether it be in the spreadsheet if you're comfortable for that, or just in the UI, and just set your current global and find the corresponding global in the new one, and get that thing fairly close to what you're doing now, and just kind of see how far off it is. Maybe with a little bit of work on your own, or maybe a little bit of help. We can, of course, we have service providers that can help with that as well. If you feel like it's too much, or if you just need some training on it, obviously we can provide that. There's resources on the, knowledge base. There's not a lot right now, but this is going to be growing. But we also have, we'd love to help. If you just get stuck, ask questions on the forums under the library data section. Hey, I've got the new foundation library. Where's the, this option? We used to be able to do, the backs this way, or whatever it is you're looking for. A lot of times it is in there, just haven't found it yet. It's in a different spot, or we go about it in a different way. Or it may be that we decided, there are some features that we just decided it's not worth it. The level of complexity that it adds, it's just not worth putting in there, because it just creates too much, clutter. But yeah, I guess just don't be afraid of it. I guess probably on the one hand it is intimidating, but it's really not. I mean, I don't feel like I'm some genius. It's just spreadsheets. You're just telling it what to do, and you just break it down part by part, token by token, product by product. Once you kind of get familiar with kind of where things are at, it's kind of addicting, actually. So, a lot of people, once they get into it, it's kind of fun, like doing a little detective work. This is the nice thing with the foundation library. Your part properties, we don't use a subassembly carcass anymore. So all the parts are just right there. And so the formulas too are, like the formula for a part origin or whatever, it just says global. Right away what global is pulling that. Whereas in the old library, we got a little fancy where it went from here to a hidden prompt, back to the global, and then back down. So it took, it was too many steps to kind of reverse engineer it. And so we try to, make it easier to reverse engineer for that exact purpose of new people coming in and being able to quickly get from point, see where something is calculating. Like, I want to know why this part is the size that it is, right? It's no longer, you don't have to get a bachelor's degree in formula tracking in Excel, It's just like this, that you just read it, it's just not that hard. But anyway.
All right. Well, no, I appreciate it, and looking forward to what keeps building upon this foundation library, and
we've just begun.
Yeah, I'm excited. So thanks again for taking the time to sit down with me and chat about this, and I think this will help a lot. ease. Some of those who are using the 50 and the component libraries. Want to. I think they'll be able to see the benefits and be like, okay, if it's going to make my job easier, maybe it's worth it to get in it and learn it, and then eventually it's just going to be the next thing that right?
It's just a different way about it, and we'll be able to support them better too, because the existing one is just, we kind of put a pause on the development. So new hardware, things that come out, that will be in the new one, but not in the old one. So that's something else to keep in mind.
All right. Well, awesome.
Anyway, thank you, James.
Appreciate it.